Everybody to the Pacific School Food Network's webinar today. We are just about to start, and I anticipate we might have a few more people coming in through the waiting room, but it's wonderful that you've joined us today. We're really excited because we actually had just over 90 registrations for this webinar. So we will be recording the webinar so that we can make that available on the Pacific School Food Network site. If you would like to stay off the recording, if you can just keep your camera off, that will mean that it's not capturing your view. So welcome to our webinar. My name is Sarah Burkhart and I'm the chair of the Pacific School Food Network. And I'm absolutely delighted today to start off with a little bit of an overview of the Pacific School Food Network, but then pass over to two of our wonderful presenters who presented at the International Congress of Nutrition in Paris just recently in August. So to tell you a little bit about the Pacific School Food Network, firstly, I'd like to recognise the Australian Government and DFAT, who have provided support to the Pacific School Food Network, which is currently implemented by the University of the Sunshine Coast. Today, we're sharing two of our presentations from our symposium at the International Congress of Nutrition. We had four speakers from the Pacific at this event, and also some remarks from Arlene Mitchell, the director of the Global Child Nutrition Foundation, and a Q&A session. So we've broken the presentations over two webinars so that we've got some time for question and answer for our presenters as well. I'm going to really give a brief overview of the network first, just to kind of set the scene. And these are the same slides that we used in Paris to set the scene for our symposium as well. But for those of you who are not aware, the Pacific School Food Network has been running for a few years now, and the vision of this network is really to improve the health of Pacific Island children, their families and their communities through healthier school food environment. So we're working through a regional, coordinated and multi-sectorial approach, focusing on promoting policy, good practice and action to foster healthier school food environments. The network aims to support collaboration, networking and sharing of resources, as well as capacity building. We also support technical input into activities related to school food and nutrition environments, a forum for policy guidance and leadership, also promote research and greater evidence to inform school food policies and activities. We're a focal point for collaboration with global initiatives. At the moment, we are the only Pacific partner of the School Meals Coalition, providing a really strong link to that global group. We also explore resource mobilisation for research and implementation activities and support sharing of Pacific knowledge locally, regionally and globally. Just on the side of the slide there, you can also see one of the pages from our newly developed website. We have a database where we've been building out examples of school food and nutrition activities across the region. So that's just a little plug to go and visit that. And if you know of more activities that we could be sharing, please do let us know. To set the scene for our presentations in this webinar and our following webinar, around the region, we're seeing a really increased effort and momentum towards thinking about school food environments and the way that they can support healthier diets, how they can support livelihoods, and thinking about broader systems-based work. There is a focus around nutrition education, particularly thinking about how this can be linked into school programs and things like gardens and local food production. We're seeing a strong focus on local food systems and livelihoods and thinking about what homegrown school meals might look like in the Pacific. We already see programs such as Vanuatu's Farm to School work, where they are linking schools to local farmers and local economies. We see different methods of school food provision. We have national programs in some countries, some are emerging. We have school-based initiatives and smaller activities. But we know that there is really a need to identify, test, and evaluate the type of models that might work in island context. We also know that there's an increased momentum and interest in partnerships and collaboration and engagement of governments, schools, local producers and communities coming together to think about how we can work to support healthier school food environments. There is regional collaboration through the Pacific School Food Network and also support across the region from UN agencies, DFAT, ACR and other global partnerships as well. We do know, though, that there is capacity challenges and opportunities across this area. Geographical remoteness and limited food production create barriers for school-based activities, but we know that funding partners are showing growing interest in supporting school meals and nutrition programs. We also know that we have some data gaps, meaning that more research and monitoring are needed to help guide policy and scale up activities. I'm going to pass over to our two presenters today. We're really lucky to kickstart the first of these webinars with Mr. Lazarus Dawa, who's working in Papua New Guinea, and Ms. Eileen Carr from Hawaii. They're going to share their presentations that they gave when they were at the symposium in Paris. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Lazarus, I think you're going to go next. So you're welcome to share your slides and start when you're ready.
All right, thanks. Hi, everyone. So today's presentation, I'll be doing it on the scoping study as part of my PhD on the school food environment and policies in some secondary schools in Papua New Guinea. So as research has shown that the adolescents and children age group gives us a critical window for impacting on their diets and nutrition. And healthy eating habits starts during adolescence and during childhood, and it carries on into the adulthood, and it determines their lifelong health and nutritional outcomes. So based on that, we know that the school food environment, which is made up of what foods are available, their affordability, and how they're promoted in schools, influence the way students choose their food and their diet. In Papua New Guinea, there is no school feeding program. However, in boarding schools, they do have catering services. Most of the schools in PNG, as shown in earlier studies, they depend on school canteen and markets that provides an important avenue for their food access in schools. So it makes up an important component of the diet for these students. So despite this importance of the school food environment, there is little evidence existing in PNG as well as in the Pacific on how the school food environment, even policies and what food that are available in schools, influence students' diet and nutritional outcomes. So this study is more or less kind of a scoping study that wants to look at what food that are available in school settings, and how do policies in schools influence the type of food that are being sold or provided to the students. So aim of the study is to explore the food environment and policies in secondary schools in PNG. Firstly, the main objective is to assess the school food policies and their implementations in the schools, and to assess the types of food available for students to access in schools. So this study was conducted between October and November last year in 2024. It was a cross-sectional design studies. We developed the questionnaires from a similar study that was conducted in New Zealand, looking at policy interventions and food availability. We got the approval from the MESI Human Ethics Committee. Schools were selected based on convenience sampling. The respondents were the deputy principals and senior teachers of the schools and even the principals. So we obtained consent. The survey were administrated online through Qualtrics and also on paper. So we sent out 84 invitations. We were able to receive only 36 respondents from the schools, and the data we analyzed, which I will be presenting today. So looking at the composition of the schools, we have 18 rural schools and 18 urban schools. Most of the schools were either day or boarding, and only 2 schools were boarding schools. And majority of the schools has enrollment over 500 and 1,000 students. So firstly, there were many variables that we looked at. Some were on the health promoting schools, school gardens, access to water and sanitation. But for the interest of this presentation and time, I will only present on the respective ones that is relevant to school food. And my presentations will be on policies and food availability in schools. So from the survey that we did, the questionnaires, the majority of the schools has some policies in place, both in rural and urban. 64% of the schools in rural areas has some kind of restrictive policies around school food and beverages allowed in schools, and 58% in urban schools has that as well. Around 35% of schools in rural area has no policies at all, and 41% of schools in urban areas has no policy on restricting certain types of food or drinks. And we ask about the perception of the teachers and the schools about the effectiveness of the policies. So out of the total respondents, 44% perceive that the school policies and rules are not effective in allowing or preventing certain types of food and drinks, especially the unhealthy ones. And then the rest perceive that it is effective. For the reasons that those that provided the reason that the school policies were not effective, one of the reasons was that they have not have written up policies. So even the school policies and some kind of regulations or guidelines were communicated through verbal communication and understanding between the teachers and the schools and even the communities and the parents. And the other, one of the main justification that they mentioned was that the schools has not effective policies because they felt that there wasn't they don't have a healthy food system. And it's like the surroundings and the community does not provide the type of food that the schools can provide or the market vendors or the canteen can provide to the students. And there is also lack of awareness around healthy diets and nutritious meals in schools. So looking at the food availability in schools from markets and canteens, we found that, as you can see from the graph, the unhealthy food options, like the processed food, like candies, noodles, soft drinks, and sugar-sweetened beverage, were widely available in school markets and canteens, both in urban and rural areas. And in rural areas, we found that the fresh, healthy food options like vegetables, cooked vegetables, fruits and nuts were more available in rural areas than in urban areas in the school markets and canteens. We looked at how the policies in schools influence the type of food that are being sold or made available to students. And from the results, we found that the restrictive policies seems to apply to school markets, but not in school canteens. In schools that has policies, they only implement or impose these policies in the school markets, but not in canteens. Yep. And in the canteens, in the school markets, healthy food options were more common in schools with policies. But irrespective of the policy status, unhealthy food options were common in school canteens, both in urban and rural areas. So that's the graph with the yellow, the green circle showing the healthy food options in school markets, mostly highly available in rural schools than in urban schools. And on my right is the school canteen. We have the unhealthy food options being highly available in the canteen. Yep. And from the results, there are some barriers in promoting healthy food environment in schools. The major ones was the lack of awareness among students, the vendors who are selling food. And schools also express funding issues. Funding is the main one of the main challenges schools experience, especially in some of the schools that they do catering for students. And also in canteen, they found that funding limits the type of food they can buy and even sell to the students. And then there is a concern on the increase of price of local foods. So more awareness needs to be carried out to the communities on food preparation, on diet and nutrition. And one of the school also expressed that it's quite expensive to buy garden food, which to a certain extent is not readily available. So the school normally goes for the cheaper and healthy options to provide to the students. So to conclude, from the surveys, just over half of the schools have a policy on restricting certain types of food being sold in school. This is a kind of an interesting finding because in Papua New Guinea, the National Department of Education doesn't have a updated or a available guidelines on school canteens, school markets, and even there is, in the absence of a national school nutrition policies or even guidelines, the school has their initiative in putting in place policies, which has shown to have some impact on influencing the type of food that are being available to students. So this is one of the positive story that can be seen and of course can pave a way forward for national governments to take greater actions to improve school food and nutrition. So more rural schools have restricted policies on healthy foods. Schools have various challenges in implementing the school food policies. Unhealthy food options are widely available in school markets and canteens. And fresh produce and healthy food options are commonly available in rural schools and not in urban ones. And we all know the challenges with that, with the food systems. And the other challenge is that restrictive policies seem to apply to school markets, but not in school canteens. So there are many reasons for it. School usually use their canteens for income generation, so not necessarily for nutritional purposes. That's something that we're looking into the future in way forward. The Ministry of Education and Health can look at, how do we shape the food environment in school, especially focusing on the school canteen and the school markets to improve the diversity of the food, the healthfulness, and also the benefits it can bring to the students to improve their diet, the nutritional outcomes, and as well as keeping them in schools. Yep, I think I have already just mentioned the implications for policies and programs. So, yep, acknowledgement to the Pacific School Food Network and the government of New Zealand through the Manaki Scholarship, all the stakeholders in PNG who has helped me with the data collection, my families and friends, and the colleagues in PNG. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take that after the presentation. Thank you, and back to you, Sarah.
Thanks so much, Lazarus. Again, watching that presentation, even though it's the second time I've seen it, it's just as fascinating as the first time. And I think you've raised so many fantastic points in there. And I'm sure we'll have some questions for you as well after Eileen's presentation as well. But thanks again, Lazarus, for taking the time. I know you're in PNG at the moment, working on your PhD, so we've kind of pulled you from that a little bit. Next up, we have Eileen Carr, who's based in Hawaii. Eileen, please feel free to share your slides when you're ready, and we can let you know if we can see those, and then you are ready to go whenever suits.
Okay, aloha everybody. Can you see my slides?
They're coming up perfectly, Eileen. Yep.
Okay. Aloha everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you today, and mahalo to all of our organizers for organizing this. Mahalo to all of you for making space in your day and prioritizing healthier foods for our Pacific youth. My name is Eileen Carr. I'm called Kumu Carr by my students, and today I'm speaking on behalf of the Pacific School Food Network and the Hawaii Farm to School Network. I'll be sharing about work we've done on empowering youth to be their own advocates. I'm a 4th grade teacher at Waikiki School in Honolulu, Hawaii on the island of Oahu. Waikiki School is known for being the mindful school, and it's also known for its thriving school garden and food farm. According to 4th grade Brianna, some of my friends and I think that farming is really peaceful. It keeps people cooperated, included, and I don't know why, but I feel not that stressed and peaceful when I farm and plant things. My students have explored our school garden through their garden class, their sustainability class, plus art, food, social studies, video, writing, and more. They're learning that the school garden is where change begins. This is some of their writing inspired by our work in the garden, and here it is being delivered as testimony to the Hawaii State Legislature earlier this year. I'm extremely fortunate to have fallen in with a group of school garden superheroes and school food superheroes, many of whom are on this call. Thanks to them, I've found seeds of advocacy in the school garden, and I'm here today because of these incredible people. In the past 2 years, our work has attracted interviews and inquiries, including a group of Kalani High School students conducting an action research project on Hawaii school lunches. We've received personal responses from a news editor and Hawaii State Senator Donovan De La Cruz. We've been featured on local news media such as Hawaii News Now and Hiki No on PBS Hawaii. We've helped to pass a bill, HB 1293, which will make it easier for Hawaii schools to procure locally sourced ingredients for school meals. Let's establish some context. When most people think of Hawaii, they think of paradise, vacation, coconuts. Hawaii is one of the most isolated population centers in the world. Like many of you, the closest continent is thousands of miles away. Our closest neighbors are all of you, our Pacific Island neighbors. Prior to Western contact, Hawaii imported 0% of its food. Today, 85 to 90% of our food is imported, and the entire state is heavily reliant on one major port on the south shore of Oahu, pictured here just a few miles from my school. The average age of a farmer in Hawaii is 60 years old, which is the highest in the United States. The situation in our public schools mirrors that of the state. Up to 90% of food served in Hawaii school meals is imported. In 2021, Act 175 was passed. This law created a statewide farm to school program and a farm to school coordinator and a school garden coordinator. It stated that 30% of food served in public schools shall consist of locally sourced products as measured by the percentage of the total cost of food. You would think that this would lead to a heightened sense of urgency, a flurry of systemic transformation, and infrastructural overhaul. However, as of January 2025, the total amount spent by the Hawaii Department of Education for locally sourced foods in the previous school year was just slightly more than 5%, including less than 0.1% for bottled local water. This was a decrease from about 6% the year before. This means that Hawaii's children are consistently being fed food that is carried in on planes and barges, food that is grown thousands of miles away from their island classrooms and homes. Hawaii's current school food system is not sustainable, and the system must change. The change will need to start from the roots, our children. Our children will drive the change, and change will need to come in the form of school gardens, local foods, and a movement rooted in joy for food, joy for the land, and joy for growing our own food. Our work starts with direct experiences in school gardens and builds up to targeted advocacy. First, students connect with local foods through plants and meaningful learning experiences in the garden. School garden-based activities help to spark seeds of interest in students so they become compelled to be advocates for local foods. We begin with Pacific-based school gardens. In our school garden, we grow, observe, study, and appreciate canoe plants. Canoe plants are plants that were packed in the canoes of the original Polynesian voyagers. We also learn to eat what we grow. Here you can see ko'ele palau parfaits that we made by layering uala or sweet potato with coconut milk and locally sourced fruits. We grew sweet potato in our garden and learned a mo'olelo, or a story that tells of how the giant ha'eku taught a group of greedy villagers the value of thinking of others. Most recently, we harvested breadfruit, fresh herbs, lemons, and butterfly pea flowers from our school garden during our sustainability class. The very next day, we roasted the breadfruit, drizzled it with herb pesto, and enjoyed our feast with butterfly pea lemonade. The seeds of advocacy start in the garden. The garden can be a powerful spark for student advocacy. The School Lunch Project is curriculum we designed to help students develop informed opinions, which are the starting point of advocacy, or should be the starting point for advocacy. Links to the complete curriculum will be shared at the end of the presentation. In part 1 of the curriculum, students take a deep dive into their school lunch menu. They find out where the ingredients come from. They find out why it matters where your food comes from. Along the way, they interview their school's cafeteria manager. Here is Waikiki School's CAF manager, Shannon Shimizu, showing students the difference between imported salad mix and beautiful, fresh, local lettuces. In part 2 of the School Lunch Project, students decide on a course of action using a menu of options in the bottom left. They also decide on an audience to target after learning more about the hierarchy of power within Hawaii school foods. Informed opinions become the basis for art and writing, which can then be used to impact the way people think and make decisions. Some students choose to express their messages through art and illustrations, as you can see in these comics and infographics from Kilauea Elementary School on Kauai. Other students chose to write letters to the Hawaii Department of Education and the Board of Education. According to our sources at the top, more student artwork is always better. Fourth graders in my class wrote persuasive essays in which they argued for specific locally sourced foods to be included in school meals, such as starfruit, breadfruit, and taro. Later, they turned their essays into testimony by adding the words, "Dear members of the committee, I support HB 1293. Other students wrote op-eds, which are opinion-based editorials. Later, they turned their written op-eds into op-ed videos, one of which is now featured on Hikino on PBS Hawaii. Here are Mina and Natsuki requesting more locally sourced foods in their school lunch.
We want more locally sourced food in our school lunch because they give us so many imported food for lunch. When imported food comes to Hawaii, unwelcome bugs can travel on the planes, ships, and trucks. That means there may be won't be because it takes time to send the imported food over to the Hawaiian island. Fruit and vegetables are good for us to eat. It is helpful for our body. In Hawaii, we grow fruits such as coconuts, mango, papaya, and tomatoes. We have so many fish in the water. So why don't we use the fish?
Hopefully you were able to hear that. Okay, last and most critically, outreach and action. We've shared our work with other educators, students, farmers, and farm to school garden advocates in workshops and professional developments. Here you can see Project Lunch, a team of high school researchers committed to using school gardens to transform school lunches. You can also see a group of students from Molokai High attending the We Grow Youth Food Summit, a student-led gathering of over 200 community members dedicated to food sustainability in Hawaii. Bottom center is Representative Amy Peruso with my former student Brianna at the Feeding Change premiere, where my fourth graders wrote a viewing guide for a documentary about Hawaii's food system. We've also directed our students' messages to the Hawaii Department of Education Superintendent's Office, the Board of Education, the local media, and the Hawaii State Legislature. We're making sure that our students' work reaches real audiences, and our students are learning that their voices matter and can make a real difference. Responses have included news articles, a letter from the editor, One Law, and a letter from Hawaii State Senator Donovan Dela Cruz. He wrote, "Your advocacy shows how powerful young voices can be in shaping a better future for Hawaii. By speaking up, you reminded all of us at the Capitol why we do this work, to create healthier, more sustainable communities for you and for generations to come. Please continue to share your ideas, your passions, and your hopes. Your voices matter, and Hawaii is stronger because of students like you." What do I see when I look ahead? I'm proud of the work we've done, but I don't want these lessons and activities to become part of a standardized yearly routine. 2030 is fast approaching, and we are very far from 30%. What would I like to see? I'd like to see my students enjoying food that we grew together. I'd like to see my students preferring meals that feature locally sourced ingredients. I'd like to see my students cleaning their plates when they see poi or pounded taro, ulu, breadfruit, and uala or sweet potato. I'd like to see my students growing their own gardens and dreaming of becoming farmers. I'd like to see my former students on first name basis with Hawaii newsmakers, editors, legislators. I'd like to see local media reporting on local food triumphs, including cooking, art, poetry, student gardens, community progress. I'd love to see a network of local food student advocacy clubs across the Pacific Islands. I'd like to close with a quote from Henry, who says, "You have taken teaching to a degree at which point the students of class C4 can change Hawaii forever. If today's 10-year-old children can be provided tools and information to feel that they are actively changing the world, then we are doing our job as educators and as a society. And the future is brighter and more sustainable." Mahalo for being here today.
Thank you so much, Eileen. There's been so many love hearts and clapping going up the screen as you're talking, and I think it's just so inspiring to hear that work that you're doing. You have an incredibly fortunate class in school, I think, and we would love an Eileen in every classroom to help kind of push that message forward. It was fantastic. We do have some time for a question and answer session now. So if you do have any questions for Eileen or Lazarus, you're more than welcome to pop your hand up and we can go around people if you'd like to ask your question, or if you'd prefer to pop it in the chat, you're welcome to write it in the chat and I can ask Eileen or Lazarus your question for you. There was one quick point there, Eileen, from Jess, whether you could put your YouTube video link in the chat as well, so that she could go back and watch that whole thing. Brilliant, fantastic. Do we have any questions from everyone who's here? One for Lazarus from Mingwei. What is the difference between school market and the school canteen?
Hi. Yes, sure. So, yeah, I think different terminologies has been used throughout the world. For the Pacific and in PNG, the school canteen refers to more like an establishment in schools, like a small shops or a kind of where they sell cooked food and even processed food in the schools for students to buy. So it's owned by the school mostly, and even not the schools or the Students' Representation Council. So the school markets refers to the venues either inside the school or outside the market, outside the schools where vendors, especially women, folks, and men, cooks food and then they sell it to students. So it's kind of informal, more like an informal setting, but the canteen is like a registered venues shop owned by the school where they sell mostly ready-to-eat food and beverages for the students to buy. So they are cool canteen and markets, but they are not providing free food. They are being sold to students. And so yeah, I think that's the difference. If that explains.
Thanks, Lazarus. I can say Mingwei has said thank you in the chat too, and great to have you here too, Mingwei, with us. We also have a couple of other questions from Dustin. Mahalo for inviting me, inspiring and wondering why we do not have more of these programs throughout the Paina. Maybe Eileen, do you want to respond to that one?
I think it depends on the resources available to educators. I'm incredibly fortunate to be working in a school with garden teachers like Miss Carla, who's on this call, like Debbie Milliken, who helped to found our food farm and plant all these trees. It really seems to come down to having people who are interested and committed and have the energy to pick up the threads of it. Our Department of Education has recently funded a program where we do have a school garden educator, but she's spread across all 8 of our islands, and she's on this call too. But I guess it's up to people to connect with like-minded people, possibly through the Hawaii Farm to School Network, and join forces and fill in the gaps where our Department of Education isn't doing it for us.
Thanks, Eileen. I'm wondering too whether if you're able to put some info about that Hawaii Farm to School Network in the chat, if there's a link that people could go to, if you could share that as well. We also have a good question here from Debbie. Mahalo for these presentations. With so much variability in how we feed children across the Pacific, how can we strategize with a shared vision for feeding children healthy food so they thrive? Lazarus, I might ask you that one first, and then we'll come back to Eileen and see what her thoughts are on that question.
Yeah, sure. From the scoping that we did here in PNG, and also a few of the studies that were done by Sarah, as you leading with the ACR study and the previous study, I think in some of the countries there is lack of the national leadership and policies in place. Because what we have seen here for the research that I did was in the absence of the national policies and national leadership, school has already taken some initiative forward in developing policies and driving them and actually implementing them in school. So these are already some positive as working momentum going already. So I think from the outset and looking at higher level that we need more investments from the government and commitment to support healthy diets and healthy school foods environment in the Pacific, because what we have seen in other parts of the world, this momentum is driven by so many stakeholders. But in countries where that is successful, it is from national ownership and national driven initiative. So that is something that is missing in the Pacific, that we need to create momentum, advocate to the government and even stakeholders to support that we should have some kind of national platform to work together. And then more like we already have the momentum that we set now for the Pacific School Food Network. But then at the country level, that is something that is still lacking. So how do we scale down to the country level? So having some kind of mechanisms in place, having the government, having the coalition partners together, and then driving the agenda for policies. And then that's where resources can come in. So there are different ways that we can mobilize resources, but then the ownership should come from national government to drive the initiative. So that's where sustainability is. And I think that's the biggest challenge in most of the Pacific Island countries. But, we can start small, like what Debbie has presented, and some schools initiative that might take longer for government to uptake it, but then at the school level, there could be some positive work that is already going that we may promote, and also through this network, we can share and promote and inspire others to take on, and that's, I think, should have some positive impact for the better of our children and adolescents in the Pacific. So yeah, I think that's from me. I can just talk on this side, but there's so many things we can discuss. But in the interest of time, yeah, I'll stop here. Thanks.
Thanks, Lazarus. That's great. And I can see Helen and just has popped in the chat. Thank you, Lazarus. We lack data in the area of your research. And we hope it will be useful on the revision of the PNG school health policy, which is now under review. So I think that's a great point. And I think the points that you've raised, Lazarus, are really important. Eileen, would you have anything else that you'd like to add to that?
I mean, I think Lazarus is exactly right in addressing kind of the big scale issues, which is that it's going to take a commitment from our governments in regards to funding and policies. We need to know that not only are we supported, with the ideal of feeding our kids healthier food, but we need money to make that happen, and we need policies that create space in school curriculums. Our school curriculums are, at least in the US, they're very influenced from, federal educational policy. So we need to know that there's a dedicated space carved out for nutrition, and for everything we're talking about today, garden to table, all of this. On the small scale, if we have the funding, if we have the time, the energy, the resources, we can do amazing things with it. My class had support from the Kokua Foundation, which is a local foundation that connected us with a chef who facilitated the process of cooking. And with or without a chef, I mean, teachers can do so much to impact their students' palates by growing food in the school garden, harvesting. So the kids are the ones going out in little groups and collecting the things that they'll need to prepare butterfly tea lemonade, or, some sweet potato or breadfruit dish, and then working together to cook something with it. I mean, my students who are, according to their parents, some of the pickiest eaters, when they harvest the food themselves and when they cook the food themselves, they go home saying, this is the best food I've ever eaten. They go home saying, I'm going to tell my family about how to cook breadfruit because, this is the best way to do it. So when we have this direct influence on their palates, we can make these little changes that can have a ripple effect in broader ways, but we can't do it all by ourselves. It takes money, it takes time, it takes the support of policies that prioritize school gardens and nutrition. And I don't know that currently we have all of that support, but I know that as a classroom teacher, we can have a tremendous impact on our students, on their points of view, on the things that they like to eat, and on the things that they're telling their families and that they're spreading in their communities. So the advocacy work is important on the one hand, but so is the importance of working with classroom teachers and people who are closely connected to schools to give them tools for gardening and eating with kids. I mean, food is the most convincing thing you could give to a person. So.
Thanks, Eileen. I think you've made some amazing points in that too. While we just wait to see if there are any other questions that come up in the chat, I had one question for you, and maybe we can get your response, Eileen, and then see if Lazarus has any thoughts too. I guess the undercurrent to some of this work is also thinking about how we get different stakeholders to work together. Like we often work in our own places. Nutrition works in nutrition, education works in education, agriculture works in agriculture. How do you think we can bring those different stakeholders together? And have you got any success stories of where that has worked really well, and what might have helped that or facilitated that to work?
I guess when I referred to the school garden superheroes who supported this, this journey and all of this work, it was really instrumental to me to have people outside of the classroom who, in the Hawaii Farm to School Network who had kind of feelers in all of these places, and they have their finger on the pulse of the Hawaii State Legislature, and they're connected to classroom teachers, and they're connected to grants that allow us to come together, to allow our stakeholders to come together, and the garden teachers and the chefs and all the people doing all of the amazing work. So I think having people such as yourselves in the Pacific School Food Network, people who are just helping to connect the dots are really, really helpful, because a lot of us are really excited to do the work, and we're excited to bring our students into this place of taking direct action to positively impact the whole school system across our islands. But I guess all of us are kind of in a little bit of a silo. All of us are a little bit isolated in the work we're doing in the knowledge base that we have. So to have these places and these people who know how to connect us and who know how to keep us kind of pointed in the direction where we need to be. So for example, the amazing Dr. Ming Wei, who's on this call, she was so instrumental at the last minute when my students were writing their persuasive essays. She happened to mention that there was a bill that was going to be that was on the table at the legislature right at the exact moment where we could add the line, dear members of the legislature, we support HB 1293. And because of that link, we were able to get our legislature our testimony into the hands of a representative who was able to get it directed to the right people and places who, read it at the critical moment in time. So I think it takes all of us working together, but I think it really involves people in places like Pacific School Network and the Hawaii Farm to School Network who are helping to keep all of us connected.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Eileen. Any thoughts from your side, Lazarus, on that?
Yeah, I guess the problem of multi-stakeholder coordination is something that is challenging in everywhere, every new topics and every programs that came up in the Pacific. We create networks and we create coordinating mechanisms and bodies, but really at the end of the day, it doesn't become sustainable. So there's no need to invent the wheels. We already have the strong foundation set by the health promoting schools and water sanitation and hygiene in schools program that is being coordinated by Ministry of Education, who is taking the lead, and they are coordinating with the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Infrastructure and Agriculture. So based on that, that's something that the focal ministry, like Ministry of Education, has to take the lead to include this school food initiative, school food and nutrition programs into those existing programs. So that needs a kind of collaboration. So there's no need to create any new coordination mechanism, but looking at the health promoting schools that we are already and which has been rolled out throughout the country. So how do we take that and advocate for the food and nutrition education to be part of the agendas for the committee or the working group? And we have some interesting partners who are already supporting the school food and nutrition program in school, like UNICEF and other UN agencies. They are looking at building and improving food environment. So having the network there as the Pacific School Food Network is the great point to start, and we appreciate the work that Sarah and Minister of Sunshine Coast and the leaders of the Pacific School Food Network are undertaking. But then we need to bring it down to the country level to strengthen the momentum. The network can create momentum for the drive and support and build and leverage the technical expert that we have from the Pacific School Food Network to strengthen the country coalition and country networks to grow and expand. And at the moment, I see that leadership should come from the Ministry of Education. So that's where they coordinate, and even from the Ministry of Health. And we have a number of policies which are coming up. So that should set pace for a new direction. And yeah, so work together to strengthen the existing network rather than building a parallel system for that. So that will be my take on that. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Lazarus. I couldn't agree more. And I think for everyone who is here on the call, we do have some exciting announcements coming up about trying to bridge that gap that Lazarus is talking about as well. So please do keep an eye out for that. But I think those points are fantastic, Lazarus, and really important for us all to be thinking about. We do have a couple more questions. I can see some of them have been partly answered in the chat, but I might just open them up to our presenters just to see if they'd like to add anything to these. Stefano has said, thanks for the inspiring presentations. On the topic of sustainability and upskilling, are there any programs that are looking at providing both or either educators and students with certifications of vocational training of such important school food programs that can be embedded into the school extra or curriculum? Thinking in the lines to empower certificate holders and also support dissemination to their communities and be recognised and potentially even economic and tertiary education opportunities beyond the schools. Great to hear and see all here. Debbie, you've put a comment about Hawaii Public Schools supporting the future farmers of America. Lazarus or Eileen, do you have any other response that you'd like to provide to that question?
I do not, but I would be very interested as well in finding out more about that. I think one of the chronic issues we always find is that it takes our energy and our enthusiasm, but a lot of times there's not any like official backing or financial support for this. But I like that your question is kind of leading to like, how do we create something more permanent and long-term for people who have passion for this, the work that we're describing here.
Great.
Yeah.
So maybe a watch this space. Go, Lazarus.
Yeah, on my thoughts on that, that will, like the questions for the upskilling for educators on school food and nutrition, that will depend on specific country. But, that's something that the Pacific School Food Network or even other regional organizations supporting the school food initiative in the Pacific should look at. Building capacity of national stakeholders and even regional stakeholders on school food and nutrition. So that's something that is lacking. So, there's different kinds of programs that are being, implemented in the Pacific, but how do we build capacities for locals and then for even national stakeholders to think along the same way that what we are visioning is also what they should be thinking. So that should be something that we should be looking at. So that's something that the School Food Network should consider, or other regional organizations who are supporting School Food Network in the Pacific should look at. But at the country level, that will depend on the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, who has programs around school food and nutrition, or maybe on health promoting schools. They do have some kind of a training for the teachers and for the health workforce on health promoting schools, but for PNG, we don't have a capacity building plan for school food and nutrition. That is something that we should discuss as country stakeholders should look at. Yeah.
Thanks, Lazarus. Fantastic. And for your thoughts too, Eileen. We might take this as our last question because we are very close to the hour. Junior Paul has written in the chat a question around school gardening, and there are a couple of responses in here already, but again, I'll open it up to Eileen and Lazarus. Any advice on how school gardening programs can be designed to promote food security and healthy eating habits among students, while also addressing the challenges of limited space, climate change, and soil conditions? Would either of you like to put any thoughts to that? You can see there are a few things in the chat in response to this, but just to let you have an opportunity if you would like to add to that.
I would like to add something. I mean, I definitely acknowledge the different ecosystems in each of our island communities, and even within the same, within the same group of islands, we're dealing with so many unique challenges. But I think some of the best solutions that have been found to some of the challenges you're describing are coming from classrooms and from educators. Hawaii has a State Teacher of the Year award, and a couple of years ago, it was given to a brilliant teacher named Jackie Freitas, who is working in Central Oahu, where a lot of her kids are not thrilled about going to school. They, they don't have like all the greatest career options, but in her agriculture classroom, they're learning farming and gardening skills, but not only that, they're problem solving all of the challenges that their local ecosystem presents them with. And I would imagine if we can direct more funding into classrooms like that, classrooms where teachers are letting their students' questions kind of drive the learning, and where their students' approaches to problem solving are changing their own kind of like life courses. I think those are some of the first places to look. So investing more in classrooms and investing in teachers, and then spreading the examples around and allowing those, those exemplars to be mentors in other places who face similar challenges.
Great thoughts, Eileen. I love those ideas. Lazarus, any final thoughts from you on that question?
Yeah, for school garden, most of the school gardens that are being run by the school or by the students are for learning purposes. But there are some few initiatives around the world. They utilize the school garden to produce food, and then they feed to the kids. It's mainly found in boarding schools in PNG, but there are some day schools where in few of the case studies around the world where they grow vegetables and they supply to the school catering or the school canteen to serve as salad for the students to eat. So it's kind of build their knowledge and understanding and behaviors on growing food and then using the food as using the produce as food as well for consumption. In terms of climate change and land limitation, that is one of the biggest challenges that we have in the Pacific. Like Debbie said, we have different environmental conditions, so diverse in the Pacific. So there may be some recommendations that are relevant to bigger countries like Papua New Guinea, Solomon Island, Vanuatu. We have agricultural potential. That is what we are looking at. Homegrown school feeding, where growing food in schools at home, and how it can sustain feeding and support feeding in schools. But there are some recommendations that are for small island countries like Kiribati, Tuvalu, that has limited land spaces. And these countries has gone ahead with innovations like raised bed farming, soil composting, even in Kiribati, they are doing hydroponics now in schools, in growing vegetables, and then how they use those vegetables to support school lunch as well. So there are some interesting initiatives that is being implemented around the Pacific. But having the access to the Pacific School Food Network, having attending webinars and having being part of the mailing list will put us all into the loop of what is happening in the Pacific and what are the experiences that we can share. So it's great to have some good participation from right now from this webinar, and then we can build on that, and this can be served as a platform for knowledge exchange and learning, and then collaboration as well. So that is some that are some good interesting questions, but we comes back to us to how do we grow from there. So yeah, I just want to share my thoughts on that. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Lazarus. And I think that's a really nice way to wrap up, because unfortunately we have made it to an hour, and I think we could continue to talk for a lot longer about this than we have. But if anyone would like to sign up to the Pacific School Food Network, I have just put the link to the website there. It's a free network. You're welcome to sign up, and we try and keep you updated with information that we find and webinars. We're really happy to share examples and resources of work that you might like to share more broadly and hear your ideas as well. But as we wrap up, I would just like to say thank you to everyone for making the time to join us today. We have another of these planned with our other presenters who have got just as much exciting information to share. The date for that should be available very soon, but we're thinking early December. But also thank you to Eileen and Lazarus again today for kind of having to come and do your presentations all over again. but I think there's been so many fantastic comments and reactions across the Zoom that I think you've really wowed us, both of you, again. So thank you for making the time to be here, and thank you everyone for joining us. We will put the recording of this webinar up on the page that we have too, and we'll share that with you afterwards. So if you'd like to go back and revisit the recording or share it with some of your colleagues, you're more than welcome to. Thank you for joining us today, everyone.